I'm Elizabeth Blackwood, a weathered 62-year-old widow with silver-streaked braids. I was grinding coffee beans at my cabin kitchen table that dawn of December 21st, 1895, when I heard hoofbeats too fast, too urgent pounding up the frozen trail. My stomach clenched. I set the grinder down and peered through the frost-etched window, but the rider was just a dark shape against the white mountains. I stepped onto the porch to greet him, yet the boy wouldn't meet my eyes. I walked closer. His hands trembled as he held out a folded paper. My chest tightened. This wasn't an ordinary message. My fingers shook as I tore the seal. The moment I unfolded it, ice flooded my veins. My knees gave way. I tried to breathe, but my throat wouldn't open, and tears came instead. Have you ever opened a message that shattered your world in seconds? What would you do if your own son's words felt like betrayal? Drop a comment, because what happened next changed everything. Let me tell you how it started. I woke before dawn as I had every morning for 40 years. The December cold bit through the cabin walls, but my hands knew the ritual kindling match strike the whisper of flame catching dry pine. While the fire built, I prepared my tea the way my Cheyenne mother taught me before the white family adopted me, before I became Elizabeth Blackwood instead of Little Sparrow. The sage leaves released their medicine into the steam. I whispered the old prayer in a language I was supposed to have forgotten, thanking the Creator for another sunrise over these Colorado peaks. Through the window, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains caught the first pink light, their snow-crowned summits sharp against the brightening sky. This land had been my husband Robert's dream, and mine. Together, we'd carved the Blackwood Ranch from wilderness when folks said a white man marrying an Indian woman would bring nothing but ruin. They'd been wrong about that. They were wrong about most things. I pulled on my worn wool dress, the one Caroline called that rag from the charity barrel, and my moccasins stitched with beadwork I'd hidden under plain leather. A widow was expected to look humble, grateful for whatever scraps her son's family might toss her way. So I played the part while my real self waded beneath the surface like a trout in deep water. The horses nickered as I crossed the yard to the corral. 6 beautiful animals, each worth more than most men earned in a year, but I'd told James they were just old ranch stock. My foreman, a Mexican vaquero named Miguel, who'd worked for Robert and knew every secret, touched his hat brim as I passed. Buenos dias, señora. The cattle are fat. The grass holds despite the cold. Good, I said, scanning the valley where 200 head grazed the herd everyone could see. They didn't know about the other 9,000 scattered across properties in 3 counties registered under names no one connected to the widow Blackwood. Back inside, I opened the trunk at the foot of my bed. Beneath the quilts lay my hidden life, the beaded ceremonial dress my Cheyenne sister Sarah had made for my wedding, the medicine bag blessed by the elders, the silver and turquoise jewelry Robert had commissioned from a Navajo craftsman, because he wanted me to honor both my heritages. I touched each item like a prayer, then buried them again under wool and cotton. Someday, I'd promised Robert's grave, someday I'll wear these in daylight. The ledger came next, hidden in a hollowed book. I ran my finger down the columns. 22,000 acres across Costilla, Huerfano, and Los Animas counties. Cattle, horses, water rights, timber contracts. The bank in Denver held accounts that would make my son choke on his morning coffee if he knew. All of it built carefully over 15 years, while I let them think I was scraping by on a widow's portion. I'd wanted to know who loved me for myself. Now, after years of Caroline's sneering comments about my primitive ways, and James's embarrassed silence when she mocked my heritage, I had my answer. The sound of hoofbeats pulled me to the window. A rider coming fast from the direction of James's ranch, a boy I recognized, Tommy, the youngest Miller's son. He sat his horse like a man with an unpleasant errand, shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. I closed the ledger and returned it to its hiding place. Then I smoothed my hair, straightened my humble dress, and went to meet whatever message my son had sent instead of coming himself. The mask of the poor widow settled over my face as naturally as breathing. But underneath, something else was stirring, something patient and powerful that had waited 15 years for exactly this moment. I spent 15 years hiding who I really was, just to see who would love me without the money, without the power. Was that wisdom? Or was it just cowardice dressed up as strategy? If you had the choice, would you live as your true self and risk losing everyone, or wear a mask and wonder who you really are? Tommy Miller dismounted like a man approaching a funeral. He was 16, all elbows, and Adam's apple in the paper folded in his coat pocket might as well have been a rattlesnake for how carefully he avoided touching it. "Morning, Mrs. Blackwood." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I got a message from your son." "Come inside, Tommy." "You look half frozen." I held the door open, watching him struggle with whatever James had told him to say. The boy had been raised right. His mother would have taught him that cruelty to elders was a sin, even if the elder had Cheyenne blood. He stood in my small front room, hat crushed in his hands, looking everywhere but at me. "Mr. James said to tell you." "That is," Mrs. Caroline said. He swallowed hard. "They're having a refined Christmas this year, ma'am. Just family. She said it's for civilized folk only, and they want to keep it intimate." The words hit like I'd expected, but that didn't make them cut any less deep. Civilized folk. As if my Cheyenne mother hadn't taught me more about true civilization than Caroline's Philadelphia finishing school ever could. As if Robert and I hadn't built this ranch with our bare hands while civilized folks whispered behind our backs about the scandal of our marriage. But I didn't let Tommy see the wound. Instead, I smiled a small, calm smile that made the boy shift his weight nervously. "I understand perfectly, Tommy. Tell my son I hope they have a wonderful celebration." You're not upset, ma'am." The confusion in his voice was almost funny. He'd been prepared for tears, maybe anger, not this quiet acceptance. "Why would I be upset? My son has made his choice. We all make choices, Tommy, and we all live with the consequences." I pressed 2 bits into his palm. "For your trouble. Ride safe." After he left, I stood at the window watching his horse disappear down the valley. The sun was higher now, turning the snow on the peaks to fire. Robert used to say that mountains never apologized for being exactly what they were. Maybe it was time I stopped apologizing too. I went to the back room, the one I never let visitors see. Behind a false panel in the wall was my real office, a desk. Robert had built me shelves of ledgers, maps of 3 counties, with my properties marked in pencil only I could read. I pulled out the master ledger and opened it to the current page. 22,000 acres. The number still took my breath away sometimes. Robert had started with 2,000, and I'd grown it to 11 times that size through careful purchases, strategic water rights, and knowing when to buy land everyone else thought was worthless. The cattle operation alone was worth more than James's entire ranch. The timber contracts, the mining leases, the parcels I'd bought in Denver when it was just a muddy supply town, all of it hidden behind shell companies and trusted intermediaries. I ran my finger down the column of numbers. Conservative estimate worth $300,000. In a territory where a good ranch hand made $30 a month, I was wealthier than anyone knew except my banker in Denver and my lawyer in Santa Fe. And I'd hidden it all for 15 years, waiting to see who would value me for myself. Now I had my answer. I reached for the small wooden box on the shelf, the one that held my most precious things. Robert's photograph taken the year before he died, his eyes still bright with dreams. My medicine bag from the Cheyenne camp where I'd spent the first 10 years of my life. A letter from Chief Gray Eagle written in careful English reminding me that I would always have a place among the people. I touched each item like a talisman. Then I made my decision. "Robert," I whispered to the photograph, "it's time. Time to show them who we really were, who I really am." I changed into my riding clothes, the good ones I kept hidden, made from fine wool that Caroline would recognize as expensive. I braided my hair in the Cheyenne way, winding it with a strip of beaded leather I hadn't worn in public for 15 years. Then I saddled my best horse, a black mare worth $200 that I'd told James I'd gotten cheap from a desperate seller. As I rode out, I didn't head toward town. I turned west toward the hidden valley where my real ranch waited, the one nobody knew about except Miguel, and a handful of loyal hands who understood that some secrets were worth keeping until the moment they became weapons. The December sun was bright on the snow. The air tasted like pine and possibility. Caroline wanted a refined Christmas, she'd get one, but not the one she was expecting. When your own child chooses a cruel spouse over you, do you quietly disappear to make their life easier, or do you stand tall and force them to face what they've become? Some people say family loyalty means swallowing every insult with a smile. But what if that loyalty only runs one direction? James's ranch sat in a valley prettier than it deserved good grass, a creek that ran year-round timber on the slopes. Robert and I had given him the land as a wedding gift, back when I still hoped Caroline might grow into the kind of woman who could love this country and the people in it. That hope had died slowly, like a plant starved of water. I rode up the lane on my black mare, sitting tall in the saddle the way my Cheyenne mother had taught me before the white family took me in. The horse's coat gleamed like oil. Her tack was silver-trimmed details Caroline would notice even if she didn't understand what they meant. I'd braided my hair the old way and wore the good wool riding dress I'd been saving. Not the widow's weeds Caroline expected. She came to the door before I could dismount, and I saw the flicker of confusion cross her face. This wasn't the humble mother-in-law she'd grown used to dismissing. "Mother Blackwood?" Her voice could have frozen the creek. "We didn't expect you. I thought I'd come see my grandson before your refined celebration." I swung down from the saddle with the ease of a woman who'd been riding since she could walk. "Since I won't be welcome at the table." Caroline's nostrils flared slightly. "It's not personal. My parents from Philadelphia have standards. They're not accustomed to—" She paused, choosing her words like picking through spoiled fruit. "To frontier ways." "You mean Indian ways?" I said it flat, not a question. "You can say it, Caroline. I've been called worse." Her face went pink. "I simply meant that your stories about savages might frighten Jacob, and there's a certain smell. Sage. I think it's not appropriate for a Christian home." The sage I'd burned that morning in prayer. The medicine my people had used for 1,000 years while Caroline's ancestors were still painting themselves blue in European forests. But I didn't say that. I just smiled. "Where's my grandson?" "Jacob is having his lessons. We don't want to interrupt his education." But the boy must have heard my voice because suddenly he was there, bursting through the door like a colt let loose from a barn. "Grandmother!" His face lit up the way only a child's can, pure and uncomplicated by the poison his mother was feeding him. He ran toward me, but Caroline's hand shot out and caught his shoulder. "Jacob, inside, now." "But Mama, it's grandmother I want to hear about Those stories are not suitable for civilized children." Caroline's grip tightened. "Your grandmother was just leaving." James appeared behind her, and my heart sank at the look on his face. Not anger, not even embarrassment, just resignation. He'd already surrendered, and we both knew it. "Mother." He couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Maybe it's better this way. Caroline's parents, they have certain expectations. You understand?" "Do I?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone after his father died, this boy I'd taught to ride and rope and read. "Tell me, James, what do I understand that you're ashamed of your own blood, that you'd rather pretend your father never married a Cheyenne woman?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out harder than I meant it to. "You're letting your wife tell me I smell wrong, that my prayers are savage, that my stories will damage your son. And you stand there saying nothing. Your father would be ashamed." "Don't bring him into this," James said, but his voice was weak. Caroline stepped forward, emboldened by his silence. "Perhaps, Mother Blackwood, it's time you accepted that things have changed. James has a position to maintain in this community. We can't have people thinking we're associated with primitive practices. My parents are refined people. They expect to dine with civilized company." I looked at her, this woman who measured civilization by which fork you used, who thought refinement meant crushing anything different under her heel. Then I looked at my son, who'd let her do it. "I see." I gathered my reins. "Well, then, I hope you enjoy your civilized Christmas, Caroline. I'm sure it will be everything you deserve." "Mother," James started, but I cut him off. "No, you've made your choice. We all make choices, son. Some of us just have to live with them longer than others." I mounted my mare and turned her toward the road. Behind me, I heard Jacob crying, calling for his grandmother. The sound followed me down the lane like an arrow in my back, but I didn't turn around. I rode straight back toward the mountains, toward the hidden valley where my real empire waited, where people knew my worth without needing to be told. Caroline wanted refined, I'd show her refined. I'd show them all. If your child married someone who taught your grandchild to be ashamed of half his heritage, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or speak up knowing it might cost you that relationship forever? Some wounds we pass to our children without meaning to. But what about the wounds we let others carve into them while we watch? San Luis huddled in its valley, 500 souls who knew everyone's business before breakfast. I tied my mare outside Murphy's blacksmith shop where Tom, Red Murphy, looked up from his anvil. "Mrs. Blackwood, you look like you've been riding through a storm." "The storm's name is Caroline." I leaned against the doorframe. "When was the last time she invited you to a family gathering?" His face went careful. 3 years ago. Said my Irish hands weren't clean enough for her table. He looked at his scarred, honest hands. "I scrubbed them raw. Wasn't enough. She never told you I loaned you the money to start this shop." His head snapped up. "That was you." "Tom, I'm hosting Christmas dinner tomorrow. 30, maybe 40 people. Will you come? Where your cabin's not big enough?" "Trust me. 2 o'clock, follow the road west past Calibra Creek." I squeezed his shoulder. "Your hands are perfect exactly as they are." Samuel Chen was preparing dumplings at the Golden Dragon, his movements precise as surgery, one of the few Chinese who'd stayed after the railroad building a business through stubborn excellence. "Mrs. Blackwood," he bowed slightly, "you honor my establishment." "When did Caroline last order from you?" His face went still. 2 years ago. Said she couldn't have Chinamen preparing food for Christian celebrations." He returned to his dumplings. Her words were less polite. "The money that helped you buy this building, that was me Samuel, through the Denver bank." His hands stopped. You needed a chance. The banks wouldn't give it because of stupidity and cruelty." I leaned forward. "I'm having Christmas dinner tomorrow. I'd be honored if you'd come." "A Chinese man at Christmas?" His voice was dry. "Mrs. Caroline would faint." "Mrs. Caroline isn't invited, but you are." Dr. Margaret Hayes was stitching a cowboy's fence post wound when I found her. Gray-haired, competent, the best doctor in 3 counties, despite half the town thinking women shouldn't practice medicine. "Hold still, Charlie," she said, then saw me. "Elizabeth, come in." When Charlie left, I told her about Caroline's Christmas. Margaret snorted. "That woman called me a mannish doctor woman last spring. Said no proper lady would cut into human flesh." She cleaned her instruments. "You deserve better." "We all do. That's why I'm inviting you to my Christmas. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Your cabin holds 6 people." "I'm not hosting at the cabin." Her eyebrows rose. "Elizabeth Blackwood, what are you planning?" "Justice." By noon, I'd invited 35 people, every person Caroline had insulted or excluded. Tom and his family, Samuel and the Chinese families, Dr. Hayes, the Mexican vaqueros, the Irish laborers, the widow running the boarding house, the school teacher who taught Mexican children alongside white ones. Everyone had a story. Everyone I'd helped quietly over the years. Everyone Caroline had dismissed as beneath notice. We gathered at the general store. "Tomorrow, follow the Western Road. Come hungry, we're going to show what a real community looks like." Tom grinned. "Mrs. Blackwood? Where exactly are you hosting 40 people?" I smiled, thinking of the hidden valley, the log mansion, the empire they'd never suspected. Somewhere that proves refinement isn't about which fork you use. It's about how you treat the people around you. We rode west at dawn on December 24th, 35 souls strung out along the trail like beads on a string. Tom Murphy rode beside Samuel Chen, their horses matching stride Irish blacksmith and Chinese restaurateur, both excluded from Caroline's refined table, both welcome at mine. Dr. Hayes sat her horse like she'd been born to it, and the vaquero families brought their children bundled against the cold. The road climbed through pine forests where snow hung heavy on the branches. We followed Calibra Creek into the mountains, the water running black and fast over stones. Nobody asked where we were going. They trusted me, and that trust sat heavier than any fortune. "Mrs. Blackwood," Tom called from behind. "How far is this place?" "Just over the next ridge." The trails switchbacked up through aspens, their white trunks like ghosts in the morning light. At the top, I reined in and waited for the others to catch up. Below us, the hidden valley opened like a secret, a bowl of grassland ringed by peaks, and in the center, my empire. I heard the gasps ripple through the group. The log mansion rose 2 stories, its massive timbers golden in the sunlight. Smoke curled from 3 chimneys. In the corrals, 500 horses moved like a living river, bays and sorrels, and Black's bloodstock worth a fortune. Beyond them, 2,000 head of cattle grazed the winter grass, and I could see my cowboys, Mexican, Irish, even 2 Cheyenne working the herds. Sweet Mary and Joseph, Tom breathed. Lizzie, this is yours. Mine and Robert's. We started building 20 years ago. I urged my mare down the slope. Come see. The great hall could hold 50 people easily. A fireplace big enough to roast a whole steer dominated one wall built from river stones Robert and I had hauled ourselves. The ceiling soared 20 feet supported by pine beams thick as a man's body. Windows looked out on the valley and the peaks beyond, but it was the decorations that made Samuel Chen stop and stare. Cheyenne beadwork hung beside Christian crosses, a Navajo blanket draped over the back of a chair carved by a German craftsman. Chinese silk pillows sat on a Spanish leather sofa. Every culture that had built this territory represented and honored. This is what civilization looks like, Dr. Hayes said softly. Not Caroline's version. This. I showed them the 8 bedrooms, each one ready for guests. The kitchen where my cook, a Mexican woman named Rosa, was already preparing tomorrow's feast. The root cellar stocked with enough food to feed an army. The bunkhouse where my hands lived better than most ranchers housed their families. We gathered back in the great hall and I told them everything. Robert married a Cheyenne woman when it was scandalous. We built this ranch when people said we'd fail. When he died 15 years ago, I inherited $5 million in land and livestock. I watched their faces. I kept it secret because I wanted to know who loved me for myself. Who would treat an old widow with respect even if they thought she had nothing? And Caroline. Tom's voice was hard. Caroline showed me exactly who she is. So did my son. I touched the Cheyenne beadwork on the wall. But so did all of you. Every one of you treated me with kindness when you thought I was poor. That's worth more than this entire valley. How much land do you own? Samuel asked. 22,000 acres across 3 counties. I'm the largest landowner in southern Colorado. I smiled at their stunned faces. Tomorrow, when we celebrate Christmas here, the whole territory will know. The gossip will spread like wildfire. And James and Caroline will learn that the old widow they excluded owns more than they could dream of. Dr. Hayes started laughing, and then we were all laughing the pure joy of justice about to be served. Tomorrow, I said, we show them what a real family looks like. I tested people by hiding my wealth for 15 years. Some call that wisdom, knowing who your real friends are. Others might call it manipulation, lying about who you are to judge others. Was I protecting myself, or was I playing God with people's lives? If you had the power to test everyone around you, would you? Or is that just another form of cruelty? I stayed at the ranch that evening helping Rosa prepare for tomorrow's feast, but I knew exactly what was happening in San Luis. I'd lived in small towns long enough to know how news traveled faster than any telegraph, more reliable than any newspaper. Tom Murphy reached town first, riding straight to the saloon where the men gathered after work. I could picture him bursting through the doors, still breathless from the ride, his voice carrying over the poker games and whiskey glasses. You won't believe what I just saw. Mrs. Blackwood, the widow we all thought was scraping by, she owns a ranch that makes the Hartwell place look like a chicken coop. 22,000 acres, 500 horses, a mansion with 8 bedrooms. The saloon would have gone quiet. Then the questions would start flying. By the time Samuel Chen opened the Golden Dragon for the evening crowd, half the town was talking, and Samuel, bless him, knew exactly how to fan the flames. He'd mentioned casually to his customers that Mrs. Blackwood had financed his restaurant, that she'd been helping people quietly for years, that the humble widow was actually the wealthiest woman in 3 counties. Dr. Hayes stopped by the bank just before closing. I'd asked her to, knowing that Jeremiah Walsh, the bank president, couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it. Is it true? She asked him loud enough for the 3 other customers to hear. About Elizabeth Blackwood's accounts. Jeremiah's face went red. Now, Dr. Hayes, I can't discuss, because I heard she's been one of your largest depositors for 15 years. $5 million in assets, someone said. The number hung in the air like smoke. 5 million. In a territory where most ranchers counted themselves rich with 50,000. I really can't. But Jeremiah's stammering was confirmation enough. By sunset, people were lined up at the land office asking to see the public records. The clerk, a nervous man named Peters, kept pulling out deed after deed, each one showing Elizabeth Blackwood or one of her shell companies owning vast tracts across Castilla, Huerfano, and Las Animas counties. "It's all legal," Peters kept saying. "Been filed proper for 20 years. Nobody ever connected them all to the same person." The saloon filled to bursting that night. Cowboys who'd worked my hidden ranch for years finally admitted where they'd been riding off to every few weeks. They described the operation, the purebred horses, the prime cattle, the mansion that rivaled anything in Denver. "She's sharper than any man in this territory," one of them said. "Knows cattle, knows land, knows exactly when to buy and sell. Old Robert Blackwood married smart, I'll say that." "She's Indian, though, isn't she?" someone muttered. "Half-breed or something." "Cheyenne," the cowboy said firmly. "And if you got a problem with that, you can take it up with her, but I wouldn't recommend it. That woman's tougher than rawhide." The news reached James and Caroline's ranch around 9 o'clock, carried by a neighbor who'd been in town. I heard about it later from Miguel, who heard it from one of James's hands. Caroline had laughed. "That's ridiculous. Mother Blackwood lives in a shack. She begs James for money every month." "I'm just telling you what the whole town's saying, Mrs. Blackwood. They say she's got a mansion hidden in the mountains. 20,000 acres or more." James had gone pale. That can't be right. My mother inherited almost nothing when father died." But I could imagine the doubt creeping in. The way Caroline's laughter would have sounded forced. The way they'd remember little things, my good horses, the respect the Mexican workers showed me, the way the bank president always tipped his hat. By midnight, they'd have decided to ride out at first light, to see for themselves, to demand an explanation. And I'd be waiting. The last report came from the newspaper office. The editor was already setting type for a special edition, Mystery Cattle Queen of Colorado, Revealed Widow's Secret Empire Shocks Territory. I smiled, imagining Caroline reading that headline over her refined Philadelphia breakfast. Tomorrow, when 35 people gathered at my table, people she'd excluded and insulted the whole territory would be watching, and Caroline's carefully constructed world of respectability would crumble like a house built on sand. Justice doesn't always come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with gossip. Christmas morning broke clear and cold, the kind of day Robert used to call diamond weather, every pine needle edged with frost, the air so sharp it hurt to breathe. By noon, my valley was filled with life. 35 people gathered in the great hall, and the sound of their laughter was better than any church bell. Children ran between the adults' legs while Rosa and her daughters carried platters from the kitchen. The smells alone could make a person weep. Roasting beef from my own herd, wild turkey. Tom's boys had brought Rosa's tamales wrapped in corn husks. Sarah Whitehorse stood before the fireplace in her ceremonial dress, beadwork catching the light. Beside her, Dr. Hayes waited in her Sunday best. I'd asked them both to bless the meal, all paths to the Creator honored equally. Sarah sang in Cheyenne first, her voice carrying the old words of thanksgiving. Then Dr. Hayes offered a Christian prayer. When they finished, I said what my heart knew. All paths to the Creator are sacred here. All people are welcome at this table. Amen, someone said, and Hoka Hey said another, and then we were all talking at once, passing dishes, filling plates, finding seats wherever we could. The feast was a map of the territory itself. Rosa's Mexican tamales sat beside Samuel's Chinese dumplings. Tom's wife had brought Irish soda bread that steamed when you broke it open. Sarah's Cheyenne fry bread disappeared as fast as she could make it. The roasted beef melted on the tongue, and there was real coffee, a luxury most couldn't afford, flowing like water. The children played with wooden toys the vaqueros had carved. Someone brought out a guitar, and soon we had cowboy songs mixing with Irish ballads. Sarah's nephew began a soft drum beat, and I watched cultures blend the way they should have all along, with respect, with joy, with the understanding that we were all just trying to survive in a hard land. Then I heard horses outside, multiple riders. Through the window, I saw them coming down the valley trail, Chief Gray Eagle and 4 Cheyenne warriors, the old chief sitting his horse like he was part of the animal itself. He was 70 if he was a day, his braids white as the snow on the peaks, his face carved by weather and wisdom. The room went quiet as I walked out to greet him. "Grandmother," he said in Cheyenne, using the term of respect, "we heard you finally showed the white world who you are. News travels fast, grandfather." "Good news does." He dismounted with the ease of a younger man. I brought you something. From his saddle he pulled a blanket, not just any blanket, but a ceremonial one woven with the story of my life. My Cheyenne mother's symbols, Robert's cattle brand. The mountains we'd built our empire in, all worked in dyed wool and beadwork. You walk between two worlds with honor, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. This blanket shows that both worlds claim you. Both worlds are proud. I couldn't speak. I just held the blanket and let the tears come. Inside, Chief Gray Eagle sat at the head of the table like he belonged there because he did. And one by one, my guests stood to speak. Tom, Mrs. Blackwood loaned me the money to start my smithy when no bank would touch an Irishman. Samuel, she bought my building when I had nothing but a dream and calloused hands. Dr. Hayes, she was my first patient when the town said women shouldn't practice medicine. She told everyone I'd saved her life. I hadn't, but after that others came. On and on, story after story. 15 years of quiet kindness revealed. She's been our guardian angel, the schoolteacher said, and we never knew. Now you know, I said. And now you know what real family looks like. Not blood, not obligation, but choice, love, respect. Chief Gray Eagle raised his cup. To the woman who remembers her people while teaching the white world what civilization really means. We drank to that. We drank to family, the one we choose, the one that chooses us back. Then someone pointed to the window. Riders coming. 2 horses pushing hard up the valley. Even from a distance, I recognized them. James and Caroline had arrived. James and Caroline rode into the valley like people entering a dream they couldn't wake from. I watched from the porch as they took in the mansion, the corrals full of prime horses, the cattle dotting the grassland. Caroline's face went white. James just stared. Then Jacob saw me. "Grandmother!" He kicked his pony forward, but Caroline grabbed the reins. "Jacob, stay with me." "But Mama, it's grandmother." I walked down the steps, 35 people filing out behind me. Chief Gray Eagle stood at my right shoulder, Tom Murphy at my left. We must have looked like an army. "Mother," James's voice cracked. "What is this?" "This is my home, the one your father and I built over 20 years. I gestured to the valley. 22,000 acres, $5 million, the largest ranch operation in southern Colorado. Caroline dismounted, trying to gather herself. "Mother Blackwood, if we'd known you had resources, we would have treated me differently." I cut her off. "Exactly. That's why I didn't tell you." "But why?" James looked genuinely confused. "Why hide it?" "Because I wanted to know who would love me for myself." I felt Chief Gray Eagle's hand on my shoulder steadying me. "Your father married a Cheyenne woman when respectable society said it was scandalous. He taught me that true civilization isn't about which fork you use or which family you come from. It's about how you treat people when you think they can't give you anything back." Caroline's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. We've always treated you with respect. You called me a savage." Sarah Whitehorse stepped forward. "You said my people's ways were primitive. You told me my Irish hands weren't clean enough for your table," Tom said. "You banned Chinese from Christian celebrations," Samuel added quietly. "You called me mannish for being a doctor," Dr. Hayes said. Caroline looked around wildly. These people are twisting. These people," Chief Gray Eagle's voice cut through like a blade, "are the true community of this territory. They build, they work, they honor each other. You woman honor only yourself." "James," Caroline turned to her husband. Tell them I'm not." But James was staring at me. "You let me think you were poor. You let me give you money. You let me feel sorry for you." "I let you show me who you really are," I said softly. "And you did. You chose your wife's prejudices over your own mother. You let her insult my heritage, your heritage. Your 1/4 Cheyenne James. Did you tell Caroline that when you married her, the silence was absolute?" "What?" Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. "Your husband has Cheyenne blood," I said. "My mother, his grandmother, was full Cheyenne. That's why his hair is so dark. That's why he can track like he does. That's the heritage you've been calling savage." Caroline looked at James like she'd never seen him before. James looked at the ground. "You married the very thing you despise," I said to Caroline, "and you've been teaching my grandson to hate part of himself." Jacob started crying. I opened my arms, and this time when he ran to me, Caroline didn't stop him. "I'm sorry, grandmother." He sobbed into my shoulder. "I didn't know Mama was being mean." "I know, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." Over his head, I looked at my son. "You have a choice now, James. You can keep pretending to be something you're not, or you can stand up and be the man your father raised you to be." I took James and Caroline inside, away from the crowd. Jacob stayed with Sarah, who was already teaching him a Cheyenne word for grandmother. The great hall felt different now, not triumphant, but heavy with the weight of what came next. "Sit," I told them. James collapsed into a chair like a man who'd been gut-shot. Caroline perched on the edge of her spine-rigid eyes, darting like a trapped animal's. "I could cut you off completely," I said. "God knows you've earned it, but Jacob deserves better than a family torn apart by pride and prejudice." "Mother, James started. "Let me finish." I pulled up a chair to face them. "James, if you want any relationship with me, here are my terms. First, you publicly acknowledge your Cheyenne heritage. No more hiding, no more shame. You tell people your grandmother was Cheyenne and you're proud of it." He nodded slowly, tears on his face. "Second, you teach Jacob both his heritages. Sarah Whitehorse will instruct him in Cheyenne language and traditions. You'll learn alongside him." "I will. I swear it." Third, you treat every person regardless of race, class, or circumstance with the respect your father taught you. If I hear you've insulted anyone the way Caroline has, we're done. Forever. "I understand." I turned to Caroline. Her face was pale as milk. "You have a harder road. You've spent years building your identity on being better than others. That has to end." "I never meant—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word." I leaned forward. "You'll apologize personally to every person you've insulted. Tom Samuel, Dr. Hayes, the Vaqueros, the schoolteacher. All of them. And you'll mean it or they'll know." She swallowed hard. "And if I do this, then maybe in a few years I'll trust you around my grandson without supervision. Maybe." "You're saying you forgive me." "I'm saying I won't stand in the way of James trying to be a better man." "But you—" I shook my head. "Forgiveness isn't automatic, Caroline. You have to earn it, and I'm not sure you have it in you." The words hit her like a slap. "Good. What about Jacob?" James asked quietly. "Jacob inherits 10,000 acres and half this operation when he comes of age, but there's a condition." I stood, walked to the window where I could see my grandson learning Cheyenne words from Sarah. "If he grows up to be a man who honors all his heritages, who treats people with dignity regardless of who they are, he gets everything. If he becomes like his mother, cruel, prejudice, small, he gets nothing." "That's not fair," Carolyn said. "Fair," I turned on her. "You tried to teach my grandson to hate part of himself. You excluded good people because they didn't meet your arbitrary standards. Don't talk to me about fair." James stood. "What do I do first?" "Go to Sarah. Ask her to teach Jacob. And you learn with him." He walked to the door, then stopped. "I'm sorry, Mother, for all of it. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be better." "See that you do." After he left, Caroline sat frozen. "He married Indian blood," she whispered. "All this time. You married a good man who was taught to be ashamed of who he is. Maybe you can learn to be ashamed of who you've been." I opened the door. Or maybe you can't. Time will tell. Outside, I watched James kneel before Sarah, asking her to teach his son. Sarah looked at me. I nodded. "If you come with an open heart," Sarah told him, "I will teach." It wasn't an ending. It was barely a beginning. But it was something. 3 days after Christmas, I sat on my porch watching Jacob learn his first Cheyenne words. Sarah's patience was infinite, her voice soft as she shaped his mouth around sounds his mother had tried to erase. "Niece," she said. "Grandmother." "Niece," Jacob repeated, then looked at me with eyes bright as new coins. "That's you, grandmother." My throat closed. "Yes, sweetheart, that's me." James sat beside them, stumbling over the same words, 40 years old and learning the language his father had wanted him to know. He'd spent the past 3 days riding between ranches, apologizing to every person Caroline had insulted. Tom Murphy had shaken his hand. Samuel Chen had fed him dumplings and forgiveness. Dr. Hayes had simply nodded and said, "Prove it." Caroline hadn't come to the ranch. She'd stayed at their place, and I didn't know if she was working on herself or just hiding. James said she was trying, but his eyes held doubt. Some people change. Some people just get better at pretending. The town had changed, though. Word of the Christmas gathering had spread like wildfire. People talked about the Cheyenne elder blessing a white woman's table, about the Chinese and Irish and Mexican families celebrating together, about what real civilization looked like when you stripped away the pretense. Old man Hartwell Caroline's father had lost 3 ranch hands who said they'd rather work for a woman who treated them like humans. The respectable families suddenly seemed less respectable when everyone knew they'd excluded good people for arbitrary reasons. Sarah finished the lesson and came to sit beside me, 2 old women watching the sun paint the mountains gold. "You did it," she said in Cheyenne. "You showed them both worlds can exist together." "Robert and I did it. I just finished what we started." He'd be proud. I touched the beadwork at my throat, the necklace I'd hidden for 15 years now worn openly. "I kept our dream alive, didn't I?" "You did more than that. You taught them what it cost." That night I wrote in the journal I'd kept since Robert died. Someday maybe I'd publish it, let people read about a Cheyenne woman who built an empire in a world that said she couldn't, who married a white man who loved her enough to fight that world beside her, who raised a son who lost his way but might find it again. The next morning, Jacob ran to me with a drawing. "Look, grandmother, it's you." He'd drawn me in 2 parts, one side wearing Cheyenne dress and beadwork, the other in rancher's hat and boots. In the middle, he'd written in careful letters, "Both." "That's exactly right," I told him, pulling him close. "Both. Always both." James appeared in the doorway. "Mother, I've been thinking, what if we started a school for all the children white Mexican native, teach them all the languages, all the traditions, so no child grows up ashamed of who they are?" I looked at my son, seeing glimpses of the man he could become. "That's exactly what your father would have wanted." "Then let's do it. For him, for Jacob, for all of them." I stood on my porch that evening wearing my Cheyenne beadwork and my rancher's hat, watching Jacob practice his words with Sarah while James listened. The empire stretched before me, 22,000 acres of proof that a Cheyenne woman could build something that would last. But the real legacy wasn't the land. It was Jacob learning to be proud of all he was. It was James finally becoming the man his father raised. It was a community learning that civilization isn't about exclusion, it's about making room at the table for everyone. I'd waited 15 years to teach that lesson, and it was worth every moment. They say the Old West was a hard place for women, especially those who didn't fit the mold. But I learned something in my 62 years on this frontier: the land doesn't care about your bloodline or your bank account. It only cares if you're strong enough to stand when the wind tries to knock you down. I built an empire not by pretending to be something I wasn't, but by knowing my worth even when others couldn't see it. For 15 years, I wore the mask of a humble widow, watching, waiting, learning who deserved a place at my table. Some might call that manipulation. I call it wisdom earned through a lifetime of being underestimated. My grandson Jacob will inherit more than land and cattle. He'll inherit the knowledge that he can be both Cheyenne and rancher, both gentle and strong, both his mother's son and his father's hope for redemption. That's the real wealth, knowing you don't have to choose between the parts of yourself that make you whole. The mountains I see from my porch have stood for thousands of years. They've watched empires rise and fall, watched people come and go, watched the land change hands again and again, but they remain constant and true to themselves. That's what I tried to teach my family. Be like the mountains. Stand tall, weather the storms, and never ever apologize for taking up space in a world that wants you small. The frontier taught me that dignity isn't given, it's claimed. And once you claim it, no one can take it away unless you let them. If my story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Leave a comment telling me what would you have done in my place, and remember, the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Your trials aren't meant to break you. They're meant to show you just how unbreakable you really are. Thank you for riding this trail with me. May your own journey be filled with the courage to be exactly who you are. Elizabeth Blackwood, Colorado Territory, 1896.